out of hatred and out of a strong sense of ideological commitment, as do their families who sometimes, not always, but sometimes celebrate the suicide, the death of the suicide bombers.
Question for Dr. Pikes. Has the Bush administration's botching of the war in Iraq set us back in the fight against Islamic fundamentalism?
I fear it has, yes. The Bush administration, as Dr. Book pointed out, is busy building sewers in Baghdad, working on the Constitution, making sure the tribes are getting along. But in this finely focused concern to make things work in Iraq, we have lost our strategic purpose. Our soldiers should be in Iraq. I'm against those who would withdraw them on any kind of timetable. But they should be in Iraq to further our strategic goals vis-a-vis Iran, Syria, Iraq, the Persian Gulf, and so forth. They should not be in people's living rooms looking for fugitives. That is the work of the Iraqi security services. And if there are no Iraqi security services, that's Iraq's problem, not ours. And the fact that we have lost sight of our purposes in Iraq, what began as an act of brilliant international sanitation to get rid of this monster Saddam Hussein, and then we'd allowed ourselves to get bogged down in the details of Iraqi life, has meant that our general policies in the Middle East, and more broadly our war against radical Islam, has been neglected, diverted, and we are focused, our politicians and our national debate is focused on issues that are really tangential to our central security concerns, the ones that we've been talking about this evening.
Okay, question from the floor.
Good evening. My name is Nicole Sadifi. I'm a British Iranian journalist, and it's a pleasure to be in front of such a distinguished panel of guests. Actually, the gentleman just before me is quite apt as to the thoughts and the question that I'd like to put to you.
One question, please.
Yes, it is. Totalitarian Islam demonstrates itself by attacking the individual as well as the mass, and those who are advocating secularism, democracy, and freedom, such as myself and someone like Ayaan Hirsi Ali or even Wafa Sultan. One of the reasons why Ayaan Hirsi Ali came to the US was because the Dutch government couldn't give her protection from extremists who are sent from places like the Islamic Republic or Sudan and fundamentalist countries. Scotland Yard has told me I would be better off in the US. The problem is there isn't a collective will amongst the people in the free land. Our only battle, what can we do to try and open the eyes of the people in the West? Half the battle we have is not only with Islamic fundamentalists, but also from within our own communities in the Western world.
Okay, who would like to answer?
I agree entirely. The way I put it is that the real battle is not the battle of the bullets, it's the battle of the op-eds. Opinion in the West is critical. In this country, it's divided roughly half-half. In Europe, it's more like 90-10, or 90-10 adverse to our position. And getting Westerners to understand the nature of the battle, getting institutions like this important university to focus on these issues, getting the media, getting other public institutions to understand it, is absolutely the priority, and it is not going very well.
Thank you.
It's certainly an intellectual battle, but I think it's on two fronts. I think one is to make evident the nature of the enemy, who the enemy is and what they're really about and what their goals are. But I think equally as important, we need to start focusing on what this country is and what our values mean. It worries me to no end going on American campuses and discovering that American children know three things about America. They know, that we committed genocide against the Indians, that we had slavery, and that we had internment camps in World War II. What we need is to resurrect or to reinvent the values that this country stands for, the positive values. If the people of this country understood what America was and were proud of these values and were morally certain, we need to get rid of this notion of multiculturalism, they were morally certain of the superiority of our value system, then it would be obvious, it would be self-evident to them that this is an enemy that needs to be crushed and we need to do something to them. The problem is that when you doubt yourself, when you're convinced that you are a creation of original sin, as many in this country believe about the United States and many in Israel believe about Israel, you cannot defend yourself. If you believe all cultures and all value systems are equal, why fight? They're as good as we are. There's no difference between us. So we need a two-pronged intellectual ideological battle. Establish the value of Western values and show totalitarian Islam for what it really is.
A written question for anyone. To what degree does Christianity cause the West to shoot itself in the foot?
I'll take it. I think to a large degree. I think that there is definitely a current within Christianity that very much is about turning the other cheek, about caring about one's neighbor, loving thy neighbor as yourself. I think that there is a certain hesitancy in our president and among many Christians to name the enemy as a religious enemy. We call it terrorism to avoid having to put Islam in the title. Because it's hard for a president who advocates for faith-based initiatives to attack faith. So there is certainly Christianity ties our hands in that sense. We don't want to name the enemy. And then when it comes to doing something about it, we care more about the enemy than we care about ourselves. I mean, it is very much a Christian war in Iraq where we place the lives of Iraqis above the lives of American soldiers, where American soldiers die in order to protect Iraqis so they don't shoot because they need a lawyer's permission in terms of targeting. That is very much out of a Christian tradition of just war theory that goes back to Augustine, that talks about war in self-defense as a restrained war, as really a war that ultimately involves a war of self-sacrifice.
To offer dissent, let me note that Israelis are also allowing themselves to be killed, and for example in Jenin put the lives of Palestinians over that of Israelis, so it's not specifically Christian, it's Western at this time. And more broadly, what one sees in the Christian world are two very different developing churches, what one might call the Northern and the Southern. And the Northern Church would be the church in this country represented by, say, the Episcopalian or the Congregationalists, which are moving away from traditional Christianity, and one finds it in an even more extreme state in Europe, what I earlier called the collapse of Christianity, the collapse of faith. But there is another form of Christianity, evangelical, Southern, which one can find in this country, and one can find, for example, in Nigeria. I mentioned before crusade versus jihad. There is a very strong sense of being Christian and what it means to be Christian versus being Muslim. So I would be leery of generalizing about Christianity since there are these two extremely different, I'm speaking obviously very broadly, two extremely different trends within the religion.
Thank you. Okay, question from the floor.